Welcome, everyone. It is especially wonderful to be with you all here today on what is a lovely autumnal afternoon at the start of the Fall Asia Week here in New York. Our opening last night with collectors, curators, and other fans of contemporary Japanese ceramics were again traveling to New York City. It was a welcome sight. However, as one of the great silver linings of the past few years, the development of online programming and our Zoom panel discussions have allowed us to reach a far, far broader international audience, both live and then via our website and YouTube, long after the show closes. So hopefully you will check it out in the course of this week. It also enables us to bring together artists and experts from distant locations to join us for a moment in time to both educate and captivate our audiences. Sadly, our featured artist, Ogawa Machiko, was unable to travel to New York for her opening, nor to be with us tonight due to the ungodly hour for her. However, I am delighted to welcome Yamauchi Tokutaro of Shibunkaku, her dealer and representative in Japan, who has awakened at this very ungodly hour to be with us here tonight and to tell us about her work from the Japanese perspective. In addition, we are joined by Professor MEGHEN Jones of Alfred University, who recently curated a marvelous exhibition on chawan, or teabowls, and is herself a leading authority on modern Japanese ceramics. We are also delighted to have two speakers who are with us from Paris via a video recording. They are SOPHIE MAKARIOU, the head of the Musée Guimet, and her manager of collections and contemporary art, Claire Bettinelli. They will be followed by our beloved client, SHIRLEY Rendell, a passionate, insightful collector of Japanese contemporary ceramics, who you may recall and enjoy hearing on our previous panel that focused on the work of Kamoto Shoji and the 2021 exhibition at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. So let us get started. For me, it has been 20 years since I first met Ogawa Sensei. While living in Tokyo for the summer of 2002, I was most fortunate to attend her powerful and truly unforgettable exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in Kamakura. I was captivated by her brilliant sense of form and texture, combined with brilliant technical creativity and her remarkable ability to convey in her work an astonishing fusion of ancient aesthetics and abstract contemporary sensibility. So that led me to 4 separate visits to her beautiful home and studio in the hills overlooking the Pacific in Manazuru, not far from the resort town of Atami. It was on my 4th visit, accompanied by my husband, Bob, that we were finally able to cement our relationship as the two of them conversed in French on the important topics of baking, as my husband is a superlative amateur cook and baker, and mineralogy. And that was the foundation of our friendship and our relationship. Since that memorable visit, I've been back numerous times and most recently enjoyed a dinner together in Tokyo this past May. Her solo shows with our gallery in 2009, 2014, and 2018 have been hugely well received, leading to many American museum acquisitions. She also participated in our French Connection show and joined in our visit to the studio of Jeff Shapiro with the other artists who had studied in France that you see in the photo on the screen now. When she had her shows, she was the honoree at that time for 2 unforgettable dinner parties at the home of Halsey and Alice North. And I'm thrilled to report that the current show, Red Earth, which opened yesterday, is already over half sold. And in the slide here, you can also see Ogawa chatting at the left with Miyako Murase, who's a big fan of her work as well. And Ogawa in her kimono showing one of Halsey's fabulous desserts that were also unforgettable. And in the photo, you have Katsumata Cheko and her partner, and Sakurai Yasuko, and behind her, Yoshimi Futamura, who actually lives in Paris. Ogawa has been a vital force in the dialogue of contemporary clay for many decades. She was born in 1946 in Sapporo and was among the first women to graduate from the prestigious ceramics degree program at Tokyo University of Arts, or Tokyo Geidai, where she was the pupil of, at that time, 3 living national treasures: Fujimoto Nodo, Kato Hajime, and Tamura Koichi. These 3 men focused on traditional functional forms and attention to surface decoration. And hence, early on, impacted by this academic experience, she applied surface decoration to these early vessels. But such approach has totally disappeared from her current oeuvre. But armed with such superb technical training in wheel throwing, hand building, and kilt firing, Ogawa has furthered her formal training with international study and travel, which included studying ceramics at the École Nationale Supérieure des Arts et Métiers in Paris, and then by living in Burkina Faso in West Africa with her anthropologist husband for several years. Working side by side, as you see to our left, with the village potters, she studied the local techniques for mold casting and clay preparation. And to this day, she employs some of the lessons learned there, which she has then transformed into her personal methodology. She is a rare living artist to have had not 1, but 3 retrospective exhibitions at major museums in Japan. In 1999 at the Seto City Museum of Art, in 2002 at the Museum of Modern Art at Kamakura, and in 2011 at the Toyota Municipal Museum of Art, about which we shall shortly hear. Here you see her in front of the poster for her show at the Toyota Museum. And I should add that those 3 museums, none of them are ceramic museums. They are modern fine art museums. So this was an incredible accolade to have these opportunities, especially as a pioneering woman artist. Her work has also been featured in important Western museum exhibitions, notably in Contemporary Clay, Japanese Ceramics for the New Century at the MFA Boston and Japan Society, and Touch Fire, Contemporary Japanese Ceramics by Women Artists at Smith College, and more recently at the San Francisco Asian Art Museum with the Bissinger and then the Kempner Steins collection. Here on the upper left, you see an earlier installation in the regular galleries where her work is featured at the left. And of course, in the show that you see at the bottom of the screen, in New Forms, New Voices, Japanese Ceramics from the Gitter Yellen collection that was held at the New Orleans Museum of Art. And the Gitters, who were just visiting me today to see their favorite daughter Ogawa's work, are passionate fans of her work. And the 4 pieces you see there is just 4 of many that are in their collection. In 2008, Ogawa Sensei was awarded the prestigious Japan Ceramics Society's Gold Prize in recognition of lifetime achievement, and was at that time only the 2nd woman ever to be so honored. Her work currently, as you will hear shortly, is on view in the exhibition Toucher le Feu at the Musée Guimet in Paris, and of course in our gallery this month. Her work can be found in major museums across this planet. The sculptural work of Ogawa is powerful, exuberant, and visually accessible. While not what one might perceive as perfect, and sometimes appearing more like shards, each of her forms exudes a compelling and captivating presence. Her double-bodied vessels, like the 2 that you see at the right, exude a very strong tension, revealing shadows within. And rather than hiding the interior form, these dark recesses further define the sculpted vessel and challenge we, the modern viewers. From the very beginning, the essence of her oeuvre has always been tied to the concept of the vessel, even as broken forms and assemblage of shards become a vessel of sorts. In the example at the left, you see one component that was in the exhibition at the Kamakura Museum back in 2002. And at the right, you see an installation that was room scale with some of those boards in the distant background behind these broken shards, assembled to make the feeling of a newly discovered archaeological ruin, if you will. But Minamura Toshiaki, an art critic, wrote in the Toyota show catalog, Ogawa humbly positions herself within each work as the instrument that enables the work to speak for itself, knowing that this approach complicates her act of creation. She uses what others might perceive as mistakes and transforms them within her oeuvre into compelling works of art. The vessel has transcended from its functional origin to a new symbolic level. Whether literally tearing apart or cut with the knife, the apertures of her thrown or hand-built or mold-cast vessels forces the viewer to focus on the intersection between interior and exterior space. Their roughness and irregularity add to the surface tensions. Combining and contrasting material, such as this series at the left of earthenware-like red glazed stoneware, to reveal brilliant white porcelain inner forms with openings and cracks between the two layers, creates the impression of newly discovered hidden vessels that radiate from the core of the sculpture. Such revelations are the key to the artist's point of view. Likewise, her commanding teabowls, like this glorious black one at the top, she simply calls them wan or bowls and doesn't really define them as tea bowls yet. We'll hear from Megan, I think, on this. They feel remarkably wonderful in the hand and quite divine as drinking vessels and are sought after in Japan for just that purpose. But they also captivate the viewer as small sculptures in terms of their irregular forms and the elegance of their thickly and artfully applied metallic and ash glazing. Truly, the work of Ogawa Machiko continues to challenge and enchant viewers worldwide with its physicality of material and brilliance of form. Here's a rather diminutive work that we brought to America and thank goodness found a good home for. But as you can see, works of this scale reveal also her passion for mineralogy as she carefully creates what looks to be naturally occurring out of months and months of laborious work. So now I would like to introduce and then address my first question to Yamauchi-san. Thank you, Yamauchi-san, for waking up so early. Not easy, I know the feeling. Yamauchi-san is a Kyoto native, and he graduated from 2006 from Central St. Martin's University of the Arts in London with a BA in graphic design, and in 2007 from Sotheby's Institute of Art with an MA in East Asian art. He first joined Misashin Gallery in Tokyo and then joined Shibunkaku Kyoto in 2008 and has since been responsible as a manager for gallery operations and overseas business. Major projects he has led include the Machiko Ogawa exhibition at Shibunkaku Kyoto in 2017, exposition Morita Shiryu Bokujin at Ogata Paris in 2021, and most recently, the Ginza Curator's Room for Shibunkaku Tokyo, which launched this year. His international art fair activities include TFAF Maastricht, Frieze Masters, and Art Basel Hong Kong. So, Yamauchi-san, my first question to you, I've just given a really brief overview of Ogawa Machiko's illustrious career across many decades. And clearly, she's a very successful artist, both within Japan and internationally, which for any artist working in clay, regardless of background, is exceptional. Our international audience here tonight is mostly not Japanese, and Ogawa's works are fascinating to them in a way that crosses such cultural boundaries. So what I would love to hear from you from a Japanese perspective, how do you view the oeuvre of Ogawa Machiko, and what do you think sets it apart from that of any other clay artist? Yamaguchi-san?
Hi, thank you, Joan. So I think what sets apart from Ogawa from the rest of the artists, I think Ogawa Machiko works that it has a universal appeal. I think regardless of background or age or the context, it appeals to everyone. And as you know, the Ogawa-san is a already very much established artist here in Japan. And recently, young collectors are started waking up to her works and the importance of her works as well. But I think it's more importantly, she kind of paved the way for the new generation ceramic artists to challenge the new form of a creation, and really not afraid to be perfect so much. It's okay not to be perfect. I think artists like Ogawa-san, show the way to the new generations, and I think that leads to the current very exciting young generation of ceramic artists emerging in Japan as well. As you know, her work is very immense, dynamic, but I think it's almost, as you can see in this photo, this is a recent collection of works from 2020. It's the combination of porcelain with the glass that you see. But I think, to me, it looks like it almost came as if it came up from the earth, itself. It's very almost like a natural object. And I don't think there are many artists around there that has, created by a human being that it actually looks like a natural object. I think that's what it sets apart from the rest of the people. I have a slide here. This is the little sentence. So we made a brochure of Ogawa-san's recent works. And on the forward, we had Ogawa-san's very good friend, Liu Fan, as a prominent member of the Japan-based Monoha group. Ogawa-san and Liu Fan's been a great friend for many years. And he was very nice to give her this wonderful sentences, which I just read out. It's called Distant Intersection. In Ogawa Machiko's objects, one perceives two distinctive voices, one that creates and one that takes apart. This is because in their encounter, creation and distraction become one. A strong fire of seduction and the blaze of rejection, resulting in the burst of flames, the wild and beautiful sensation of eros, the attraction of dissonance. A wise man once said, whatever man builds up, nature will return it all to the ground. Ogawa Machiko makes it appear as if these two sides of the world are turned into one, a distant intersection where love and eternity breathe, guided by earth and fire. It is a scenery of immense contradiction, or rather a vessel of compassion, May 2021, Liu Fan. I think this beautiful sentence sums up a lot about her works. She's not, she has always carved her own path as well. I think, as Joan said, that when she was in Tokyo University, she had such a master teacher to her, which she continued not to continue in that direction either, and not as well as the objet-yaki from the previous generations. She didn't go that path either. And this is so original. And I think it's just, that's really that sets apart from the rest of the artist. Yeah. So I have unfortunately, I couldn't have the Ogawa-san participating. Unfortunately, it's me, but I have a video that I made last year, and I hope you can see a bit of it.
私がアフリカからすごく学んでそれを作品にしてるっていうふうに言ってくれます。大地と空がつながっているトータルな場に3年半本当に暮らしたっていう寝起きをしたっていうことがやっぱり作品に何か影響を与えてるのかなって今思ってます。だからこういう塊でも要するにいろんな下に生の柔道の塊ありますけどその中からなんていうかな自分がイメージできるこうしたいと思うのを探す土が決めてくれるみたいな塊がある形が絶対こうじゃなきゃダメみたいに言ってくれる自分の風景を見つけてほしいみたいに書いてますよね。だから何かやっぱり共有したいっていうのは根底にあるのかなって伝えたいとかそういうのは結局はそういうことなのかなっていうのをこの年齢になって気がついたのかな、ようやく。
So I think she's now in her 70s, and she's now looking back, I think, more often ever than her experience being in Africa, and how that was an important factor for her creation. And I think the word she says in the video, the shapes already exist. That really sums up Ogawa-san's work, and such a wonderful artist that I'm glad that I can work with.
I was very moved by that video, and I was struck, knowing her a long time, but the gentleness of her voice and the refinement of her physically and the beauty and elegance of her as a woman is in stark contrast to the work that she produces. Her work is so robust and so dynamic and so powerful. It's sometimes hard to believe it comes from that body and that woman. I often am struggling to hear her because she speaks so delicately, and that video says it so well. So everyone here is really lucky to see that, since we can't have her in person. We had the best of her. We had her in her home, which was wonderful. Thank you very much, Yamauchi-san.
Thank you.
My next guest, who I would like to introduce, who many of you already know because she's participated in prior panels, and surely you've read some of her publications, is Professor Meghen Jones, who is the Associate Professor of Art History at New York State College of Ceramics at Alfred University, where she teaches courses on East Asian material and visual culture and global ceramic history. Trained in ceramic craft design at Musashino Daigaku in Tokyo, she received her PhD in the history of art and architecture from Boston University, with a wonderful dissertation on the modern ceramic pioneer Tomimoto Kenkichi. Her publications include Ceramics and Modernity in Japan, co-edited with Louise Court, another dear friend, from 2019. And she was the curator most recently of Path of the Tea-Bowl, exhibited at the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum just this past year, with a forthcoming catalog edited by her, I just heard, hopefully out at the beginning of 2003. So we will stay tuned for that, Meghen. So Meghen, my first question to you, as seen in her latest exhibition, Ogawa Machiko's vessel forms are striking, and when combined with her choice of glazing, can even be confounding. Her tea bowls, however, seem to defy their purported function, which is to prepare and drink tea. Based on your deep study of tea bowls for your recent exhibition at the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum, what is conceptually challenging about her exploration of utsuwa, and how does her work in general confront tradition? Megan?
Thank you so much, Joan, for this invitation to participate in this panel on such an important contemporary ceramic artist. And what a great two-part question, since Ogawa looks to utsuwa, or vessels, for just that, confronting tradition. So first, I'm sharing with you a slide that defines for us, according to the standard Nihon Kokugo Daijiten dictionary, the definition of utsuwa. It's important to remember, as Ogawa herself has said, that an utsuwa is more than just a vessel. So we look at the four-part definition here. 1, a vessel or container. 2, an instrument or tool. 3, the size of a person or one's ability, the size of a person's ability, I should say, leading to the phrase utsuwa ga ouki, literally the container is big, referring to a person with a compassionate heart. And the fourth part of this definition is join, or vulva. And if we look at the Chinese character for utsuwa on the upper level there, we see that it's composed of 4 squares, suggesting many containers, or shiyu. And in the center of them is a revised version of the character for inu, or dog, implying a watchdog guarding important things. And then I'd like to show you a couple of posters demonstrating just how popular this term utsuwa has become as a key concept for contemporary ceramics that challenge tradition. In 2009, as we see on the left, 2121 Design Site in Tokyo staged the exhibition Utsuwa, featuring the vessels of Lucy Ri, Jennifer Lee, and Ernst Gamperl. The great fashion designer Issey Miyake was instrumental in organizing that particular exhibition. And he described Lucy Ri's work, for example, as neither Eastern nor Western. And I think when we consider Ogawa's embrace of the concept utsuwa, we can think of it as along those lines too, as Yamauchi-san was saying, towards a more universal approach to understanding the meaning of a vessel. In 2017, the Museum of Contemporary Ceramic Art at the Shigaraki Ceramic Culture Park organized the exhibition Utsuwa, the Dramatic Vessel. And we can see on the upper right a work by Ogawa. We see in the middle there a work by Rudolf Staffel. The curator of that exhibition, Miura Hiroko, said that in every country in the world, again, this sense of universality, utsuwa is found wherever people live. And she went on to say that the development of ceramics as an art form has changed the essential concept of utsuwa from utilitarian vessel to a symbol of art. So utsuwa, my point is here, is a much different term than a term like chawan or teabowl, terms that are tied to what are perceived as particularly East Asian or Japanese traditions. The English title of this important 2011 exhibition of Ogawa's work was Archetypal Vessels. And this title conveys this universal sense of origin that many of us sense when we're looking at her vessels. The Japanese term for this exhibition was umaretate no utsuwa, literally newly born vessels. And note the term utsuwa is placed in brackets here, encouraging us to consider its multiple meanings and significance. Again, Yamauchi-san just touched on this, but I wanted to emphasize again the importance of a phrase that she uses in this exhibition catalog. We see the catalog there on the right. She uses the phrase, katachi wa sude ni aru, the form already exists. So this is another essential point, I think, to understand her concept of utsuwa, the form already exists. She also refers to digging out already existing forms. And these are concepts all not tied to a specifically Japanese cultural framework. the earth that we may imagine Ogawa is digging out is one really before what became considered Japanese traditional ceramics emerged. She recounts visiting the Tokyo National Museum while she was a student at Tokyo Gaidai and being inspired by works on view such as these, Jomon and Yayoi vessels. She's very outspoken in saying that she was more inspired by works like this rather than wanting to emulate the ceramic art of any modern ceramists of Japan that became so celebrated in later periods. So in this sense of looking to the ancient past of Japanese ceramics, she's sort of following the footsteps of the 1950s sentiments of the artist Okamoto Taro, who famously urged Japanese artists to overcome, on one hand, Japanese traditions, but on the other hand, also Western traditions. And he looked to inspiration in prehistoric ceramics that he described as having a kind of primal emotion, not only for Japanese people to be inspired by, but for people everywhere. And then if we look to her more recent 2018 installation piece for the National Museum of Guitar, we see that it epitomizes her concept of utsuwa. And it sort of defiantly bears no relation to historical precedents in Japan or elsewhere. First of all, because installations of ceramic art are certainly a recent phenomenon. And equally innovative, I would say, is her combination of mediums, as you touched on earlier, Joan, here porcelain containing glass that resembles water. And the scale, there's an article from not too long ago in a leading Japanese art museum describing the scale of her work as being such that one would not think they were done by a woman. And so I think Ogawa is also defying tradition in a sense by being a woman artist in a world where such sentiments are still published. The title here is Time Unearthed, in Japanese, Hori Dasareta Toki. And I want to point out that this toki that appears here in hiragana suggests a double meaning. Toki meaning time, or toki meaning ceramic. So her vessels, her utsuwa, these universal forms in a sense, certainly provoke consideration of a number of huge issues, including earth and time and more. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. That was really illuminating. And I love how you drew the word utsuwa into all its manifestations. And in many ways, one could argue that Ogawa-san's work is the epitome of representing all of those multiple meanings in the piece we see right now on the screen. That was terrific. Thank you. Our next speakers, of course, are from France, and they are here with a pre-recorded video to answer two questions, but I will tell you the question that I asked them, and then we will turn on the video so you can hear the response. The current exhibition at the Musée Guimet, Toucher le Feu, spotlights Japanese women who are successfully working as full-time professional clay artists today. And as we've heard tonight, that such a career is not easily achieved, this is even more remarkable. So as a curator and as a, shall we say, museum director, truly, what was so compelling to you about this combination of biographical and historical factors, that so much so that it inspired you to acquire the material in the show and then to present this exhibition? Also, how do you think those factors have informed the creation of the incredible artworks now on display at the Musée Guimet? And I should also tell you who we're speaking, give you the biographies. SOPHIE MAKARIOU is the president of the Musée National des Arts Asiatiques, Guimet, in Paris. She began her career as a heritage curator in 1994 at the Louvre, where she took over the management of the Islamic section and was responsible for the project to redeploy the national collections of Islamic arts. She eventually took over the management of the newly created Department of Islamic Arts, and the spaces dedicated to those collections opened in 2012. In 2019, she was appointed head of the Musée Guimet, which is the largest Asian art museum outside of Asia. With a focus on the relationships between Asia and France and positioning the museum's collection within an international context, her curatorial vision has resulted in many important exhibitions over this past decade. She is joined by production manager of exhibitions and contemporary collections at the Musée Guimet, Claire Bettinelli, who co-curated the current show of Japanese women clay artists, Toucher le Feu. So I just read the question to the audience, and Bonnie, if you want to start the video.
Well, actually, I must say that I have to pay my debt. And my first debt is to a fantastic meeting with Joan Mirviss. We met in Paris. Joan was there to visit, especially the Musée d'Henry, a very secret place. And just after the end of this visit, we discussed the idea of, spending time together and discussing few things. It was the beginning, I would say, of a talk about, of course, what is a real specialty, which is contemporary ceramic made in Japan by great artists. It's not only that I'm kidding, of course, when I say that I want to pay my debt. It's really true, because I think she's very fundamental, and thank you so much, Joan, in the discovery of many great artists and in the promotion of many great artists. And it's really after a first talk that I decided with Joan that I decided to focus really on women artists. Why? Because in fact they are very peculiar in a way. They came, I would say, not exactly from nowhere, but they came unrooted, I would say, in a familial tradition. And this idea of having a distance with family tradition, which is so different from a huge part of the creation in Japan, sounds very exciting to me. It was brand new, and maybe it was really what is definitely their mark. It's very difficult to be free. It's a weight in a way. Or you transformed this weight into an element of creativity, or you are just buried under it. And what I found really fantastic in the first ceramist of Japan, female ceramist I discovered, was their freedom, the amazing freedom. And I would say that really between, I would say, the first generation, which was able to touch fire, which were formed at the university, but also by some Japanese potters, and what is made nowadays. Obviously, there is something which has changed. I think those ceramists are more and more powerful. They are very strong because they are free. And it is exactly what I feel in their work that I love, really, and which was the fuel of this collection.
Yes, it's totally true. And you can see on the pictures that we'd like to display the sculptures as sculptures and as ceramic for the ceramic, and not only for women artists, and to show to the Parisian and to the French public how these ceramists are important today.
What is very striking, in my opinion, is that you really feel in the history of those creation the moment where they get rid, I would say, of being, I would say, pupil, which is not totally true, but they have ceased at one moment to be behind. They are really frontline artists. They use ceramic as a language, and they use it in a very strong way.
Yes.
I can thank them, but I'll thank them tomorrow. Sophie was a dream client to work with. She is not trained in Japanese art history at all, but she instinctively gravitated to whatever I was showing her. She'd pick out the best piece. And then Claire, as co-curator, who came on board late in the development of the collection, did this amazing installation that you got a peek at, which has, every time I went there in June and July, there were scores of people standing there and everyone was taking pictures. It's such a photographic exhibition. And I would argue that each and every one of those pieces never looked better in their lives as they did in that really spectacular installation. The catalog that they produced is small but choice, and I think it's 10 euros, and I believe you can get it online. I'm still trying to get my group of catalogs, but it's a wonderful small addition to the library. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, who's a friend and a client with, I would say, an impeccable, truly impeccable eye. Shirley Rendell is a passionate collector of Japanese ceramics from Boston, Mass. She was born into an academic family and regularly went to museums as a child with her dad. She worked for the director of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and then had a full-fledged career as a television journalist before entering the world of collecting, which you will hear her speak. You can understand she was a successful television journalist for sure. With her husband and business partner, Kenneth W. Rendell, a well-known dealer in historical letters and documents, they have built many important collections for serious clients on a wide variety of material. And now Shirley collects for herself. And fortunate for me and for her and for the world of Japanese clay, she is a profoundly insightful collector. So my question to Shirley is for this evening, one of the delights for me doing these Zoom gallery talks is hearing from devoted, passionate collectors like yourself who live with their artworks and develop real relationships with the works. From a collector's point of view, what has been your experience with those works by Ogawa Machiko that you already own? Shirley?
Well, Joan, my collecting experience with Ogawa Machiko has been something of a revelation. I hadn't been collecting anything quite so earthy or with such a concept. The materials and the ideas were different. So when I saw this work in 2018, I surprised myself by saying, wow, that's great. The work is called Torn Sculpture, and it's from her 2017 Torn Vessel series. I found it astonishing with its torn edges, its cracks, and its fissures, and that glass glaze, her signature glass glaze, suggesting water flowing out of a crevice in the earth. Unfortunately, so did a major museum. Here you see the major museum, which absolutely had to have it. I could hardly blame them for wanting it, though due to a miscommunication, the museum thought they had spoken for it first. So as a favor to Joan and to the artist, I yielded. So when you are in Paris, you can see it in the current exhibition at the Musée Guimet, or you can look very carefully right here. At the time she made this, Ogawa had returned from Africa and was living in Tokyo, where she was wondering what her place would be in Japanese ceramics. She had been showing her work for about 10 years when this untitled work went on exhibition at the Ueda Gallery in the Ginza. She liked this gallery because she thought her work would be displayed better than in previous department store exhibitions and that people would understand it better. Sometimes I wonder who originally acquired it, as it would not have been a conventional choice at that time. Certainly it demonstrates a high level of skill, but the vision was unique. What I like best about it is its relative simplicity, its subtle coloring, and that fabulous mouth. I think the carving on the mouth is wonderfully decisive. It tells me that this artist is sure of herself. Personally, I think Ogawa's work is so accessible, you don't have to know much about it to enjoy it, yet learning more. And by now I have read a lot about her and listened to interviews with her, and we just heard a fabulous one, is so rewarding. As I live with what I've acquired, I think it adds immeasurably to my experience as a collector. So far, I've only collected work from Ogawa's geologic series. This is partly because I am drawn to vessels and partly because I like her vessels, which are often sculptural. This is one of my favorites. It is called Time on Earth and is from her 2018 series. When I walk into this room, which I created to display my collection of Japanese ceramics, this is the one I often go over to touch. The shape of the conical vessels appeals to me, but it's the color and the texture which makes me want to run my hand over it, which I do. I acquired it without much hesitation. When my husband saw it, he said, "Oh, why did you buy this?" "Well," I said, "there's something primal, don't you think?" Primal and timeless are words that are often associated with Ogawa's works. The essay in the Red Earth exhibition catalog is illuminating on how Ogawa's visually engaging works invite us to think more deeply about the concepts she is passionate about, such as timelessness, memory, the unknowable past of the earth and of humanity, and the utsuwa. More intellectually engaging than some artists. I think her work does inspire reflection, and I think it can be stimulating to the imagination, or at least to mine. And I'm sure that what I think is what she was actually creating, but that's an interesting dynamic that goes on in my head. To me, this Time on Earth vessel has a ritualistic quality. I was interested to read in Listening to Clay, the new book by Halsey and Alice North and Louise Port, what Ogawa told them about three-legged forms. She said that the idea for this form came from objects she had seen in various excavations, and that there were many three-legged vessels among ancient Chinese ceramics. In Africa, she says, they are used to hold food. An aspect of collecting that I particularly enjoy is displaying it. I don't like crowding, conscious of what works with what, or as some say, the conversations between pieces. With Ogawa's work, I find there are two requirements. First, it needs breathing space. And secondly, it works best with other strong pieces, as it is very strong itself and can easily overwhelm its neighbor. Presently, I have Time on Earth near this work by Okabe Mineo, which was created in 1968. I have been told that Okabe was inspired in part by ancient Chinese food vessels often used in rituals. Very, very different from Ogawa, but I think it's an interesting juxtaposition. My experience of Ogawa's work was enhanced by having the opportunity to meet her. In October 2019, Joan arranged for a group of us to visit the Enora Observatory in Kanagawa Prefecture. Oh my goodness. This is the brainchild of contemporary artist, designer, and photographer Sugimoto Hiroshi. It is an architectural marvel and perhaps the best place on earth to view the summer solstice or the winter solstice. We were joined by Ogawa, who has a home nearby and who's a friend of Sugimoto. They are said to have had long discussions about his plan for Enora. What struck me about her was her curiosity. This is a place she knows well, but she was looking at everything very carefully, especially the stones, the fossils, the architectural elements, which Sugimoto likes to collect, all the while engaging with members of the group. My favorite memory is of when we reached a citrus grove. Adjacent to it was a single-story, ordinary-looking building filled with rocks, minerals, and fossils. And what should I see but Ogawa observing them closely, then taking out her camera for a photo, and then checking to make sure she had a good photo. As you can see, I took a photo of her taking a photo of the fossils, which have been fascinating to her for decades. This is my latest acquisition. It's called Red Vessel. It's from her present 2021 Red Earth series. Truly, I think Ogawa has a special way with red. I enjoy thinking how she was inspired by Yayoi earthenware and West African soil in creating it. This is an example, I think, of how Ogawa's work can be taken at face value or prompt reflection both. Look how elegant this work is and commanding, very commanding. Then think this series is reflecting on humanity's unknowable past and the utsuwa as a tool of human life. A special thrill for me with Red Earth is something so small, I'm not sure you can see it in the photograph. There are unusual markings, evidence perhaps of early human touch, and a prompt for my memory, watching her observe fossils at Onora Observatory. If you would like to see this piece, you don't have to travel to Paris this time. You can go to Jones Gallery in New York City, where it's part of Ogawa's solo exhibition until October 28th. In closing, I would like to thank Joan for her foresight in introducing Ogawa to an American audience, including me. And I would like to thank Ogawa Sensei for her courage and spirit in pursuing her own artistic vision. Joan?
Thank you, Shirley. Impeccably well said. And I think I'm sure inspiring to the collectors out there to open their hearts and open their minds in directions that maybe they hadn't thought about, and how important it is to have that special relationship with the works themselves. And the additional joy of when you have the opportunity to meet the artist in person. It makes the whole experience that much more real and memorable. So thank you, Shirley. So Yamauchi-san, we would be interested to hear about your personal connection to the work and the meaningful relationships in Japan's art world that led you to Ogawa. As one of the leading dealers in Japanese art, both antique and modern, how did Shibunkaku, while representing only a few select living artists, come to represent her work in Japan?
Thank you, Mari-san. I think, well, actually, I first heard Ogawa-san's name from Mabi-san. When she visited us many times, I was talking to Mabi-san and said, is there anyone interesting? And she just pops out from her mouth, Ogawa Machiko. And I sort of had her name for a while in my head. And then there's this 2011, as everybody mentioned, this wonderful exhibition at Toyota Municipal Museum in 2011. And so I went there, I saw this amazing exhibition, and I immediately wanted to contact her. So I ran into the curator's room and asked her about her to Amano-san. And after that, I got her contact, called her. And I think by the next month, I was already at her house. But as you know, Ogawa-san is very careful and also, so I had a friend who is friend of Ogawa-san, who's Hatakeyama Koji. He is a bronze artist. He was a good friend of Ogawa-san. And I've already done his show in Shibunkaku before I met Ogawa-san. And so this is the works exhibition I did with Hatakeyama Koji. He's very, very fantastic, a bronze artist from the Takaoka city in Toyama Prefecture. And Hatakeyama-san and Ogawa-san were both were showing at Ueda Gallery, where Rendell-san just mentioned. And Ogawa-san was actually the first client who bought Hatakeyama-san's work when Hatakeyama-san had the first solo show at the Ueda Gallery. And since then they were very close. And actually, so he helped me to connect with Ogawa-san. Actually, Ogawa-san called Hatakeyama-san and said, what is the Shibunkaku? They want to represent me. And Hatakeyama-san said it's okay. So that's how I got to meet her, and we did her show, I think 3 times now. And every time I do the show, her works is different as well. So we are very, very happy to do her, because she's keep evolving. She never stops. And I think that's a very attractive side of about Ogawa-san's work as well. Yes, so this is another photo of Hatakeyama-san's work. Actually, further, I also represented Kuroda Taizo-san's work. Sadly, he passed away last year, but so it was like a trio. Hatakeyama-san is the youngest, and Ogawa-san and Kuroda Taizo, they were kind of similar age. Once a month, they had like this gathering. No, I didn't know it was happening once a month, but maybe once in 2 months, they gather in Ginza and eat curry rice. That was kind of their thing. And I was really, I was very, very honored to show 3 of those amazing artists, including Ogawa-san. And I hope to continue showing her.
Thank you. That's a great story. It's such a Japanese story. As I had said, it took me 4 visits. Sounds like it took you 2 visits. And I didn't have Mr. Hatakeyama-san behind me to convince her. But she already had been working with me. So in a sense, you had both of us behind you. But I agree completely. You never know when you're planning a show. Okay, we're doing a show in 4 years. No idea what's coming. And when it comes, it's like, wow, it's a whole new realm of work. And even at her mature age that she is now, she remains creative and vital. It's quite astonishing. Yeah. So thank you very much. That was great. My next question is to return to Meghen. In advance of the exhibition you curated at the Alfred Ceramics Art Museum, The Path of the Tea Bowl, you had the opportunity to correspond with Ogawa Machiko about her tea bowls. What did she say about their presentation reception in Japan, where tea bowls have such deep roots and expectations surrounding their form, materials, and function? Meghen?
Thanks, Joan. Indeed, we included her work in our exhibition, Path of the Tea Bowl, here at the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum. And I asked the artist about her history of tea bowl making, since in one sense, her tea bowls really do stand out within her oeuvre, and not all ceramists who make installation art also make tea bowls. And the next image I want to show you is the bowl that was in our exhibition, borrowed from Carol and Jeffrey Horvitz. It's a 2008 bowl made of akazu and shigaraki clays. Those clays connected to ceramic producing areas that began as early as the Kofun period. So there's that historical connection in the materials themselves to the history of Japanese ceramics. But here, like in so much of her work, she's relying on the techniques of using those concave molds according to methods she learned in West Africa in the early 1970s. Joan, and as you pointed out earlier, the title of her tea bowls is very important. She's titling them wan, meaning bowl, not chawan or tea bowl. And when I asked Ogawa to define tea bowl, her reply was that it is simply a vessel, a form that contains. She wrote utsuwa, nai ho suru katachi. And then she went on to write that she thinks you can use this freely as a vessel in a broad sense, even if one appreciates it as one beautiful form. She writes that the container accepts everything: food, water, flowers, even one's thoughts. What was really fascinating to learn, in addition to hearing about the way she conceives of defining tea bowl, is the story of her first tea bowls that she made after being asked to do so by Hayashiya Seizo, whose 2017 obituary you see here. And as it notes, he was the premier Daiichi researcher of tea bowls. So Ogawa told me that in 1987, he invited her to participate in a prestigious exhibition at Takashimaya department store. The exhibition was celebrating 500 years of chanoyu. And in response to his invitation, she said that she cheekily replied to him that she could make a bowl to hold green liquid, but she could not make a bowl for chado, or the tea ceremony. But she took up the invitation. She went ahead and made bowls, but she says that they didn't appear to viewers at the time as tea bowls. And Hayashiya, including her work, subjected him to a great deal of criticism at that time. Despite all that, she has indeed continued to make bowls that have been used as tea bowls, as you noted, Joan. Even during periods of frustration, she says, when she felt she couldn't make them. And she's accepting now that many people indeed can use her bowls as tea bowls for matcha. And here's an image showing us her box lid inscriptions, wan, or bowl, and the inverse is inscribed machi, for Machiko, of course, with her red artist seal. And the Horvitz collection tea bowl is similar in some ways to this example in the Victoria and Albert Museum, both resonating with unglazed wares of prehistoric Japan, and also in conversation with those artists, including Li Yufan and others associated with the Monoha group, who were really interested in what materiality could be revealed. And we see that here in these great photos showing us the bowl from all angles. And in our exhibition, I thought that these two bowls had a lot to say to each other. Both of these artists, Ogawa and Mihara Ken, titled their tea bowls Wan. They created their works by hand, not on the potter's wheel, and they left much of the surfaces unglazed. Mihara said that for a maker living now, the tea bowl should put forth something new. And I think Ogawa and Mihara did just that. So thank you, Joan, for that question, allowing me to remember one of the great bowls in the exhibition.
Thank you, Megan. I think you have, for the neophyte collector, intrigued them enough that they actually want to learn more about this subject. And I love this comparison between Mihara and Ogawa, glazed and unglazed, round versus straight-sided, yet they have a real wonderful dialogue going on. Beautiful comparison. Thank you. My next question will go back to Paris. And we have a short question for Sophie. Could you tell us about the Ogawa Machiko sculpture in the collection of the Musée Guimet? While you had already acquired a few works by women Japanese clay artists by the time you purchased this one, this work was radically different from any of them. What specifically about this work made you believe it an ideal candidate for acquisition by the museum? And how do you see it has served to enrich your collection in this field?
Because at this time, we already had some sculpture from Futamara Yoshimi, and I think in our
Katsubata Sheko.
Yes, she was in our collection already, but not this kind of sculpture.
Futamura Yoshimi and Katsumata Sheko, they are relationship. The way they look at nature, the organic forms. There is something, the use of color too, well, which is not totally true for one of them. Something which is very much related to trees, to vegetal and so on. So there is a strong link between those two, for example. Ogawa Machiko came, I would say, from another side, creating in a totally different language with other references. She worked with earthenware from Shigaraki. What I wanted especially was this piece. This piece for me is very dear. I love the aspect which is totally pure white with a kind of transparent and whitish glaze, which has been softened. There is no angle. You can touch it. It's very smooth. And it's a kind of pot which has been destroyed in a way. It's a kind of vase. It's a huge one. Could be a shell. You have the feeling it's only a fragment of something which have been lost in the past. And it's full of reminiscence for me. So it touched also my passion for archaeology. And I've seen some installation made by Ogawa Machiko of various pots, sculpture vessels, I don't know how to call them, which are fragments, huge shards of disappeared vessels. And you have the impression of having a kind of gigantic excavation. So I would dream, for example, of having a wall installation of Ogawa Machiko.
It's true that this work of Ogawa Machiko is so important for the collection, and it's so different that all the public that came and that I had the chance to discuss with said to me that it's a really strong work, a strong ceramist, and they are very touched by this one. So thank you so much to having choose this one.
Thank you to you for having organized with me this beautiful exhibition, and thank you very much to the artist and to Joan. Bye-bye, New York.
And Shirley, I hope you're not dripping tears of pain having lost this piece to the Guimet, but maybe there's some solace in the fact that hundreds, if not thousands of people will be enjoying this in a public view. And it's beautifully displayed there, you have to agree. And wow, that's a dream to do. Yamauchi-san, maybe we could arrange a huge installation to go to Paris and be in the museum. It's something to dream about, right? Maybe we can make that happen.
Let's do it.
Okay. I have one last question, and that is, before we close this up tonight, is the last question for Yamauchi-san, which is, with your major establishments in Kyoto and Tokyo and participation in international fairs, how do you personally think the appreciation of and the market for the work of Ogawa Machiko differs in Japan and the West?
Thank you, Joan. I think she's, as I said, very much established here in Japan. But you know, we go into Europe, and I know there's a Guimet, and then in New York there's you, but I don't think there are still major people it's not so aware of her works yet. And this is just an example of a photo from just TIFAF Maastricht that we participate in Holland, the Netherlands. And this is our stand. And as you can see in the right in the middle, I showed Ogawa-san's 5 Mountains. There's recent works alongside with the post-war avant-garde artists, such as there's a Morita Shiryu screens at the back, and on the front there is Suda Kokuta from Kobe. They are both from the post-war avant-garde works. But as you can see, there are another calligraphy by Inoue Yuichi, the member from the Bokujinkai. On the left, there is Shimamoto Shozo from the Gutai group. And they're all excellent works. They're all really powerful works. But as you can see, like her works always fits in with alongside of it any kind of genre of art, but yet it doesn't disturb them either. And I think it has such a, and also it dominates it at the same time, if you know what I mean. It doesn't really, it fits right in, but it dominates. And it's very rare to find artists like that. But in international fairs, we tend to show, I think the size matters as well. I think there's a difference between Japanese audience, the house we live in environments are different. So I think when I go to outside of Japan, I tend to think about the scale a lot. And I'm very fortunate we managed to deal this 5 mountains rock pieces from her, Ogawa-san. And so we decided to display right in the middle of the center, so that all the works can gather us to that. But in comparison to this, for example, in Japan, this is one of our inventory from Tachihara Kyosho's works. And you can see the incense container of Ogawa-san's. So maybe it's, the international audience is not so much appealing. But again, I just want to express that also that her works just is very universal. And I think it goes with any aesthetics. And it also shows the variety of her works and the materials that she uses, and is such a versatile artist. And there's another photo of a pairing up with bow with a scroll of Yoshida showing. But I think when I go to outside Japan and when I'm showing in Japan, I think, as I said, the scale that comes in order to appeal to the audience that in that genre, the area. But I think Ogawa-san is, at the end of the day, is very, very universal. And I think even this kind of a scale, it appeals really, truly to the international audience as well. But when I come out to the fairs and when I only have 5 days, I tend to go with choose the biggest scale. Yeah.
I understand completely. But then you hope and pray when you're at that fair and you have a work that's 100 pounds or 150 pounds or 80 kilos, that the person who's buying it doesn't live on the other side of the planet, and now you have to ship it. This is the dilemma of fair business. But absolutely, I'm sure every person who saw your booth with that gorgeous wood framework and those commanding pieces in the middle was immediately captivated. My question is, did one person buy all 5? Did anyone go that way, or did you sell them all individually?
Unfortunately, I didn't sell that work yet. In TIFAF, there are many audiences and many attractions, but they were, unfortunately, we didn't have the time to seal the deal that day. But it's still, actually, they're still in Paris, and we are, yes, we're coming back in October. So, but yeah, there are one person actually really considering it, but it's not really done deal yet.
Yeah.
So
there's something about her work where it speaks louder in a grouping than as a solitary work.
Yeah. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us tonight, and to our wonderful speakers who gave you such a terrific insight into the world of Ogawa Machiko. Coming up, as we go forward, our show will be open and available for another month. And we have an online virtual catalog. If you want to look at it and download it, please feel free. Our next exhibition will be another amazing woman artist, Hayashi Kaku, with a very different approach to color and form. And then in January at my annual event at the Winter Antique Show, we'll be juxtaposing the work of 10 major pre-war, post-war artists versus some contemporary masters, 10 by 10 artists. So it's something to look forward to. And I'm hoping in December that we will be doing our next panel. We'll be on the forthcoming Horvitz Collection touring show of Japanese women clay artists, of which Ogawa is a major component, that will be opening at the Art Institute of Chicago and traveling around this country with a very scholarly catalog by Joe Earl. And that's something we can look forward to this spring. So thank you all for being with us. Thank you, Yamauchi, for waking up at a ridiculous hour. And say hi to Ken, Shirley, and Megan. Keep up the good work and carrying the flag for contemporary Japanese ceramics. Good night, everyone, and thank you very much.